Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Bill Maher just torched AOC and the hard left for what he sees as a headlong dive straight into socialism. And wow, the backlash came in hot. The sharp-tongued host has been ringing alarm bells about Zoran Mamdani from the second the guy announced his run for New York mayor. Now that Mamdani has actually clinched it, Maher watches AOC ride that socialist surge, and he's livid. Strap in, people. This clash is gearing up to explode in spectacular fashion today.
If anybody is skeptical, I would say get to know him. And once you get into a room with him, kick the tires yourself and make your own assessment instead of just kind of making assessments from what you may see on television. Something that I share, that I feel like I share with Zoran, is that the way sometimes people are painted in media doesn't always align with who we really are as individuals. And so I think that when people get to know him as a person, when people get to know us as real people.
So AOC is snapping back at critics like Maher, who warned that Mamdani and his ultra-left agenda won't just sink New York, but could sabotage the DNC's entire 2028 run. Maher and others claim that elevating an openly socialist figure is political Russian roulette, the kind that pushes moderates away and hands opponents a gift-wrapped attack line. But AOC says people should actually learn who Mamdani is before judging him, and honestly that's pretty ironic coming from her since she never offered that same grace to Donald Trump or any conservative candidate. Her sudden demand for open-mindedness feels more like selective compassion than sincerity, and that's why her defense is sparking skepticism across the aisle. But Maher blasted back.
I know the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes.
Maher is blaring the warning sirens yet again. And this time he's swinging with zero restraint. He says the left is practically begging for electoral collapse by hitching their hopes to Mamdani and his proudly socialist platform. To Maher, this isn't brave leadership. It's political self-destruction. He argues that by elevating candidates who champion fringe ideological experiments, Democrats are putting both their credibility and their relationship with voters on the line. Instead of widening the tent, Maher thinks they're shrinking it, driving off moderates and independents who want workable fixes, not ideological crusades. In his eyes, the left is drifting straight into a catastrophe of its own making. And he's pleading with them to snap out of it before the damage is irreversible. But did they listen? No.
This election is taking place when we have a corrupt campaign finance system which allows billionaires in both political parties to select the candidates they want and to buy elections.
It's wild how figures like Bernie Sanders keep insisting America would flourish under socialist policies, even though they've personally cashed in big time on capitalism. These are folks whose careers, book deals, speaking gigs, and public clout were all fueled by the very system they now swear is beyond saving. And deep down, most of them know neither they nor their empires would last 5 minutes under the brand of socialism they promote, yet they keep pushing the narrative as if they'd somehow be exempt from the fallout. That's the kicker, calling for sweeping redistribution while enjoying the wealth, freedom, and opportunity that only a capitalist engine could have handed them. It's ideological purity delivered from an incredibly comfortable seat.
It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening.
Maher is quick to remind New Yorkers, and AOC, that the city can't just magically reinvent socialism like it's some shiny new product launch. History's stacked with countries and states that tried the same ideological experiments only to buckle under cold economic reality. Maher says New York won't suddenly become the miracle exception to a long track record of failure, no matter how fiercely its leaders try to rebrand the ideology. And here's the twist. AOC herself recently claimed that New York is the rule, not the exception. If that's true, Maher warns, then folks better buckle up. Because if the rule is failed socialist policy, the ending isn't going to be prosperity. It's going to be a totally predictable, totally avoidable collapse.
Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
Maher then shifted his focus to Bernie Sanders, zeroing in on a socialist policy the senator once proudly implemented in Vermont, a policy that spectacularly unraveled the moment it was put into action. This is the pattern Maher relishes exposing. On paper, these ideas sparkle with elegance and moral clarity, almost poetic in their ambition. But reality has a way of exposing their flaws. That's when the cracks widen, costs soar, and idealism collides with the harsh arithmetic of economics. Maher stressed that Sanders' Vermont experiment didn't merely stumble. It collapsed in full view, like a house of cards tumbling under the slightest pressure, proving that noble intentions can't replace practical governance. Socialist policies, he argues, promise equality and fairness but frequently deliver shortages, inefficiency, and financial chaos when scaled up. And Vermont wasn't some hostile testing ground. It was a state with every advantage, politically and socially, to make such experiments succeed. Yet even there, the system buckled under its own weight. For Maher, this serves as the cautionary story the left ignores, even as they advocate for similar programs on a national level.
Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Maher doesn't hold back. He zeroes in on Bernie and AOC, pointing out that they aren't your run-of-the-mill Democrats. They're socialist Democrats. Their political lens is rooted in socialist ideology, far removed from the broader, more moderate Democratic agenda. According to Maher, this distinction is crucial, especially when their policies drift well beyond what most mainstream voters actually want. What sharpens his critique, though, is the irony he highlights. Both Bernie and AOC owe their success to capitalism, not in spite of it. Their careers, influence, book deals, and national platforms all thrive on the very system they publicly critique. Yes, capitalism has flaws. Maher concedes it's messy, unequal, and often frustrating. But he insists it still beats socialism, which has historically led to stagnation, shortages, and political decay. Capitalism may not be perfect, but it fuels opportunity, innovation, and upward mobility, benefits that rarely survive under socialist frameworks. Maher's point is unmistakable. You can critique capitalism, but don't act as if socialism is superior when your own success depends on the freedoms and prosperity capitalism alone delivers.
Mamdani seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, "If the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again." Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
Exactly. They completely ignored Abigail Spanberger's warning, and now the DNC appears to be hurtling straight toward full-blown socialist policies. What makes this shift even more concerning is how closely it echoes the rise of the woke movement. Loud, ideologically rigid, and driven almost entirely by the fringes rather than the party's core. It's not moderates, independents, or everyday Democrats pushing this agenda. It's a small, hyper-vocal faction convinced that radical transformation matters more than broad appeal or winning elections. Yet, despite the obvious political risks and deep polarization this creates, the majority of Democrats remain eerily silent. That silence isn't neutrality, it's tacit approval. By refusing to confront the extremists within their ranks, they're letting fringe voices dictate the party's identity and future. Spanberger recognized this trajectory years ago and tried to nudge the party toward a practical, voter-friendly path. But with leadership unwilling to check its own ideological excesses, her warning went unheeded. Now, the DNC is edging toward policies that could cost them not just elections, but the trust of the very voters they claim to serve.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times.
I've said it here before, and I'll say it again. The DNC desperately needs to return to the center and shed the woke theatrics that keep dragging the party into political quicksand. These tendencies weren't just minor missteps. They were a major reason Democrats lost last year's elections. Voters were tired, frustrated, and disconnected from a party that seemed more obsessed with ideological symbolism than practical solutions. Yet instead of course-correcting and embracing a moderate, pragmatic approach, the DNC has made an even bigger error, doubling down on socialist policies. Rather than learning from past mistakes, they're veering further left, adopting ideas that alienate moderates and independents, the very voters who decide national outcomes. It's a strategic miscalculation that suggests the party listens more to its Twitter activists than to the American people. If Democrats truly want to rebuild trust and regain momentum, they must understand that the country doesn't crave fringe ideology. It demands competence, balance, and common sense. Until the DNC grasps that, they'll continue stumbling into avoidable defeat.
So they're quiet quitting capitalism and texting socialism that they're down to. Thing is, socialism will you. Because socialism, to put it simply, just doesn't work and has never worked. Like Kevin Federline.
At the end of the day, the message couldn't be clearer. The DNC stands at a crossroads, and the decisions it makes now will shape its future. Critics like Maher have been sounding the alarm for years, warning that embracing socialism and fringe ideologies isn't daring. It's politically reckless. Figures like AOC and Bernie Sanders may think they're forging a new path, but their success depends on the very capitalist system they frequently criticize, exposing a stark disconnect between ideology and reality. Meanwhile, most Democrats remain silent, letting the extremes define the party's identity while pushing moderates and independents away. History and real-world experience show that policies rooted in socialist experiments often crumble under practical pressures. Maher's warnings serve as a stark reminder of the risks of repeating these mistakes. If the DNC hopes to survive and thrive in upcoming elections, it must return to pragmatism, embrace the center, and focus on solutions that resonate with everyday Americans rather than chasing ideological purity. And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe for more content just like this.